Two Geeks, Two Beers podcast. Nerdy obsessions, drunken ramblings. With Morgan, Jeffrey, and Tom Eames.
Food, everybody! Come on, Nasha. Let's watch the fun.
Can tell which
Every
one mine
time.
was.
Every time.
Oh, hello, and welcome to Two Geeks, Two Beers. No, it's not a podcast about ale, but rather two blokes in their mid-30s chatting about nerdy things while having a brew. So, albeit virtually right now, but hopefully for not much longer. Got a couple of cinema trips in the pipeline. Haven't we?
How many people do you think have tuned in, subscribed to this podcast, thinking that it is a beer-themed podcast? It is a beer-themed podcast. We consume the beer, but it's not really about the beer. That's more of a... You know, it's a side secondary.
I think we might have stumbled upon our problem for our listenership.
Yeah, we're bad at advertising, and the people we do advertise it to totally just miscomprehend what the podcast is actually about. So there you go.
Exactly. So if you are here for the beer, I do apologise, but we are drinking beer. I'm thoroughly enjoying it as ever, whilst pretending we're in the pub talking about pointless stuff. So. In today's episode, we're doing something a little bit different. We're talking about a mini history of my favourite comic book growing up. So unlike you know, you loved your Marvels and your DCs, a bit, you know, all the cool American stuff, you know. But I was all about something very, very British, the Beano. So coming up, how Dennis the Menace's predecessors were an ostrich and a bear, one of the biggest coincidences in pop culture history, and a fascinating time jump that occurred right under our noses that would make Lost fans shocked.
Right.
And I think you know what I'm about to talk about later.
I know what you're going to talk about, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because if you hadn't, I was going to. I think it's amazing and fascinating. So I'm really glad you're going to bring this up. Are you going to talk about it as well? And I think I'm right in saying this. I, as a kid, was convinced that the Beano and the Dandy were like, they're our rivals. Like they were like Marvel and DC. Funnily enough, they were like absolute rivals. Like that you were either a Marvel kid or a DC kid, or Star Wars or Star Trek. Like you have to pick a side, Beano or Dandy. And I found out years later, it's the same publisher. Yeah. It's like, but I'm sure they played into it, like you know, like Sonic and Mario, and like I'm sure they played up the feud. You know, Desperate Dan versus Dennis the Menace, but it was entirely like inflated, self-created publicity, utter nonsense. Couldn't believe it when I found that out. It shook me to my core. It really did.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're any American or international listeners, the Beano and the Dandy are very long-running comic book, magazines, or whatever you want to call them, in the UK, and they're not like, you know, superhero-type comic books. They're very much sort of just fun, silly, you know, like, I think in America they call it the funnies, you know, that sort of stuff, where it's like a lot of just childish but funny humour, very anarchic in their own way, but yeah, it's been going up for many years, nearly 100 years, in fact. And the Dandy was led by this pie-eating big bloke who looked a bit like, I don't know, what would you describe the way Desperate Dan looked like?
Do you know what? I'm just thinking, if there is anyone who is listening to this who isn't British and doesn't know what the Beano or the Dandy are, like it sounds utterly ludicrous.
Yeah, no.
Yes. So we used to read a rather funny comic magazine called The Dandy, and that was fronted by a cowboy who ate cow pies. It just sounds utterly ludicrous, like a parody of British pastimes. So Desperate Dan looked exactly like my PE teacher when I was at school.
Terrifying.
One of the few times I was like, you know, celebrated at secondary school was when I made, like, this was pre-Photoshop, remember? I made like a photo mock-up of Desperate Dan, but with my PE teacher, Mr. Stern. He was literally called Mr. Stern. Wow. Like a Mr. Man. His face on Desperate Dan's body, and I stuck it up in the sixth form common room, and everyone was like, "Mate, that is
you are the bomb."
That is incredible, and I was never that popular again.
No,
it was that one day, but that's a niche reference because most of you don't know what he looked like. But
I enjoy the story regardless.
Yeah, thank you. No, Desperate Dan was a cowboy, and his Aunt Aggie, I believe, made him cow pies, which were essentially like a beef pie, like a steak and kidney pie, except they had actual like bull's horns sticking out of them. So that's the Dandy. That's the alleged rival to the Beano, although it really wasn't. But carry on.
Yeah, and I was a big fan, particularly of the Beano growing up from a young age. I was probably about 7 or 8, and when I started getting the Beano every week, and it always felt like I was a bit of a grown up getting that delivered. It was like the first time I experienced like post coming to me that was addressed to me. What was like the first magazine you had?
Animals of Father Wood magazine, as I believe we addressed in the episode, the Two Geeks, Two Beards episode of the same name. But I'm just imagining you now, like 8 years old, sort of brewing coffee, and then
in a dressing gown.
Yeah, in your sort of silk dressing gown, and being like, oh, of course, mustn't forget my Beano, and like opening the front door, and it's like been delivered, and you're like, put your feet up, read the Beano.
But then I started collecting any Beano memorabilia I could find, the old Beano annuals you'd get at these market stalls, and anything related to Dennis the Menace. Really, I had Dennis the Menace bubble bath, all that kind of stuff.
Because we've been friends now for quite a few years, and when you said you wanted to do an episode about the Beano, I was like, bit rogue, all right. But I didn't realise. I just thought, sure, collect the. I used to read the Beano, but I didn't realise that this obsession went this deep for you.
No,
Beano memorabilia.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as you could get back then, pre-internet, but like, Dennis the Menace quickly became my favourite fictional character, and my mum at one point painted my entire wall, like almost like a Dennis the Menace mural. It was an amazing painting of Dennis and Nasher. And then years later, I got a bit older and it was a bit lame. So I
when you start having girls back and they're like,
exactly.
What's that? Why is one of your walls entirely covered with a massive Dennis the Menace mural?
Exactly, but we wallpapered over it. But then years after that, when I felt like we changed it again and we ripped off the wallpaper. I forgot it was there, and it was still there, and it looked amazing. So we took a photo of it, and I'm hoping, I can't remember if we painted over it, or because obviously I've long since moved out, but I don't know if they painted over it, if they put more wallpaper over it, but I'm hoping it's still there. But I do have a photo of it somewhere, so I'll have to post that on our socials at
Absolutely.
some point. It was probably only about 3 or 4 years that I was a particular fan of the Beano, and because of all that kind of stuff, it's always meant a lot to me. But when you're a kid, as we've said, 3 or 4 years is a long time, and so the Beano has left this important mark on me, even though it hasn't been a thing in my life for nearly 20 or 25 plus years or whatever. But because of that period, it was very Pogs and the Beano. That was my thing growing up. And clearly I wasn't the only one. We had a couple of messages. David Alt on Twitter said, I still have my collection of 80s and 90s Beanos. I loved it. And now this I thought fascinating. He said, I remember being distraught and writing in when Dennis ditched his trademark black and red for something more cool. Now, I did tweet him back saying, wait, when was this? He didn't respond yet. But I don't remember. I don't know if that was like a one-off story or what, but as far as I'm aware, he still has his same outfit.
Well, first of all, what is cooler than Dennis the Menace's red and black striped jumper, jersey? Maybe it was like when Superman turned into like electric Superman, and it didn't last. It never lasts. Or when like Spider-Man gets a new outfit and fans freak out. It's like it's not going to last. They're going to go back to the classic look. Don't worry.
Well, we have more of that kind of thing of characters changing later as well. And Stu on Facebook also said, my dad used to buy me this and a sweetie on a Saturday morning. Dennis and Nasher are my favourites. Then one day, Dad informed me that I was too old for the Beano, which was news to me, so he started buying me Roy of the Rovers instead. I was gutted at the time, but didn't say anything as I didn't want to see him immature. Did learn to love Roy of the Rovers though, so it turned out fine. I like that. I like that idea. I never read Roy of the Rovers, but something tells me I'd have really loved it if I read that at the time. But never mind, too late now.
Stu there, I feel like, I don't think you're ever too old for the Beano, but that's quite a sophisticated thought process where he was like, well, I'm devastated, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to seem immature. I think you were quite mature, Stu, at that age.
Yeah. Anyway, so a little history of the Beano. So in 1921, DC Thompson, the company, They had first entered the field of boys' story papers with a series called Adventure, and then they've had a few other successes, including the fun section of DC Thomson's Scottish weekly newspaper, The Sunday Post, which included the two strips All Woolly and The Bruins. This gave R.D. Lowe, the head of children's publications at DC Thomson, the idea to create a comic intended for both boys and girls and consisting mainly of, as we said earlier, funnies and more light-hearted adventure and tech stories. So they also created the Dandy in 1937, which was still aimed at children but a little bit more mature.
Is that the difference? Because like if they're both like they seem quite similar to me. So is is it like you go from beavers to cubs to scouts? That's apparently how I chart adolescence. Is that so you sort of upgrade to the Dandy when you're a little bit older?
I think that was the thinking anyway. I think the Dandy was, I'm assuming it was aimed at children, but I think adults enjoyed it as well. And they placed an advertisement in the Daily Telegraph to find new artists to create weekly comic strips for his second book. And Reg Carter, who'd originally published Mickey Mouse comics in the 30s, responded in January 1938 with a few ideas and sketches. So Carter and Lowe's eventual idea would be an ostrich that misplaced his eggs, which would later become the character Big Eggo, which was the first cover star of the eventually named The Beano on the 26th of July 1938. Right. Big Eggo, the ostrich, was the first main character of the Beano.
Right, we want this magazine to appeal to boys and girls. Now, we know that boys love like cars and robots and stuff, and we know that girls love like fairies and anything pink. What do both boys and girls love? Good question. I'd say an ostrich.
Ostrich?
Ostrich. Right. No one's got anything against an ostrich, have they? Really?
Do you know what Beano means?
No. Beano.
Beano?
I'd love to say B yes, but the answer is Beano.
Well, the comic takes its name from the English word Beano, which is a short form of bean feast, which is a term for a festive meal or loosely a good time. So it just means Beano. Great, cool.
So at the time of recording, me and Tom are going to go out for a few beers this coming Saturday for the first time in about 7 months. But we're going to have an absolute Beano, mate.
Yeah.
Absolute Beano. Yeah. Can't wait.
Absolute Beano.
Absolute Beano.
Yeah, I think it's like Anakin Skywalker used to say wizard. I think it's similar to that. That is so Beano. I think that's what it is. Anyway, the first edition of the Beano, dated 30th of July 1938, and it sold at 2p. It was full of comic strips such as Lord Snooty, Wee Peam, Dead-Eyed Dick, Tin Can Tommy, and others.
Dead-Eyed Dick?
Annoyingly, Dead-Eyed Dick didn't have a Wikipedia page. I'm just going to look now. It must be
if it hadn't been for Dead-Eyed Dick, I'd been married a long time ago.
Dead-Eyed Dick, Beano. Is there any history of this character?
Careful when you're googling Dead-Eyed Dick.
No, he was a little cowboy, essentially, a little cowboy fella. But it was an instant success. It sold 443,000 copies in his first week.
Wow.
Back in 1938.
It was only 2p, so what do you expect?
So Big Eggo was the cover star until 1948 when Biffo the Bear took over. Biffo essentially looks like a cross between, it's like Rupert the Bear but dressing up as Mickey Mouse.
Right.
If you can imagine that. And so he was the cover star right up until 1974, and then Dennis the Menace took over. So Dennis had been in it, I believe, since the 50s, but he took over as a cover star in 1974, and Dennis has stayed there ever since, but more on him.
So you had like 40 odd years of this bear fellow who I've never heard of. Baffling. Never knew it.
Justice for Biffo. I mean, Biffo stayed in it for a while after that, but he'd like been demoted. Sort of like when you're doing the Radio 1 breakfast show and then you sort of hang around like a bad smell for about 10 years and then...
you're not quite old enough or sort of distinguished enough yet to go to Radio 2. Radio 6 don't want you. You're not cool enough for 6 Music. So...
No. Other famous characters include Minnie the Minx, the Bash Street Kids, which we will get onto in a minute, the Numbskulls, which were essentially the plot of Inside Out, if you've seen that. It's very much the same thing. Roger the Dodger, Billy Whiz, and Tricky Dicky. Earlier characters who have been phased out include Ball Boy, Les Pretend, Ivy the Terrible, the Three Bears, and Pansy Potter. And then you have older characters like Biffo the Bear, Lord Snooty, Babyface Finlayson, and Little Plum. They have recently made returns here and there as fun-sized quarter-page strips, apparently.
Wow. See, my memories of the Beano are hazy because I'm not really dived into this world since I was a kid. But what I sort of remember, and I'm not sure if it's Roger Dodger or Tricky Dicky or any of these similarly named characters, but the sort of recurrent theme of a lot of these strips seem to be mischievous young boys getting into scrapes and then wangling their way out of trouble. They would always be like, "Oh no, I'm in a scrape. Better wangle my way out." That seemed to be to be
just all a bit naughty, aren't they? Just all a bit like always carrying a catapult wherever they're going and a pea shooter. I remember when I was a kid because Beano was still very, Beano's still going, by the way. Yeah. But Beano in the 90s are still very much like mainstream. And I remember like as kids in the era of, again, pre-internet, pre-computers, we used to have things like whoopee cushions and pea shooters and all sorts, even when I was a kid, like I was back in the 40s or something. And I was like, does that still happen to kids now? Do kids still get things like that? I hope they do.
I do feel like the days of the pea shooter maybe long gone. It does sort of feel like culture didn't move on massively from sort of like the 40s to the 90s, and then suddenly like
the mid 90s, the internet arrived and just changed everything.
Suddenly everyone has iPhones and the world is just a disaster.
Yeah. Well, that's another episode altogether, I'm sure. Anyway, the style of Beano humour, as you say, is very much all that sort of naughty fare. It's the long-standing tradition of it is anarchic humour. Historically, many protagonists were characterised by their immoral behaviour, e.g. pranking, long before the likes of Morgs and Logan Paul existed. Like Dennis the Menace and what have you. Dishonesty, like Roger the Dodger, and even robbery, like Babyface Finlayson and the Three Bears. Although the reader's sympathies are assumed to be with the miscreants, the latter are very often shown punished for their actions. Recent years have seen a rise in humour involving gross bodily functions, especially flatulence, while depictions of corporal punishment have declined. So, for example, the literal slipper, the most common form of chastisement for characters such as Dennis, Minnie and Roger back in the day, like teachers would get a slipper out and smack them with it, or the cane. Slipper has become the name of the local chief of police, so Sergeant Slipper is the all that kind of thing.
Nice.
So,
they've taken that concept of beating children and they've evolved it in a clever way. So I like that.
Many issues, which is what I liked about it for the Beano, and it also included like a free gift inside. So sometimes you had sweets, as I say, water pistols, whoopee cushions, cardboard pistols, glove puppets, loads of different toys. And then the Beano celebrated its 50th anniversary with a free poster that had a timeline of the comic book's history on the back, which I thought was really cool. And originally, it says here, free gifts would be attached inside the cover or strategically placed on the front so that it could distract the buyer from other comics next to the Beano on the shelves. Now, I'm assuming someone's got some sort of citation for that, but it's like someone was about to go, I'm going to get this a copy of Razzle. Oh no, there's a whoopee cushion in this.
But what does that? What does that mean? Strategically placed to distract you from other titles next to it? Was it like such a massive gift that it like spread out across the shelf? I don't even understand.
Well, having not been in shops properly really for the last year, I'm looking forward to having researched this. I'm looking forward to going back into like a newsagent's and just sort of seeing what's on offer now for kids. Are there still these sort of magazines? Do they still exist? I mean, Beano does still exist.
I don't think.
But I don't know if they still have these sort of things with like free gifts and sweets and all this kind of shit.
If they still had it like 18 months ago, I don't think it will have massively changed.
No, I mean, I haven't looked for about 20 years. I'm just saying.
Oh, right. I thought has the pandemic finally killed off the free gift? Has the pandemic killed the whoopee cushion?
And related to that, Rob, one of our regular listeners on Twitter, said, I wasn't a regular reader, but I do remember my grandma once buying me an issue which came with a car that could drive up walls as a free gift. And I also got the odd issue from a local Summerfield. just a little mention of Summerfield. Does Summerfield still exist?
No. So I think the Beano has outlived both Summerfield and Safeway. Do you know what was an absolute shitter when you were a kid? Was when these types of comic magazines would have a free gift on the front.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh well, you know, it's produced by a professional publishing company. Surely they've created some kind of adhesive that will attach the gift to the magazine. But when removed, will in no way damage the magazine. No, just sort of like sellotape gone. Just regular old sellotape, and you would take it off, and it would just rip the cover, and you'd be like, no, my cover, like what were they think? How was that like a viable business model where the free gift, which was a bonus, but would then like utterly destroy the comic magazine, which was the main point of the purchase?
I think nowadays they put it in a plastic wrapping, don't they? I think that's what they probably do.
But that's probably bad as well, isn't it? For the
bad for the environment.
So
a few episodes ago, I can't remember which one it was. You said that you were a member of the fan club growing up. Which one was that?
I can't remember which episode it was. I was probably drunk, but I was a member of the Monster Munch fan club.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
and all I got was like a little certificate saying you are now a member of the Monster Munch fan club, and a little badge that was like, you know, Monster Munch fan. And you know what? I actually had a packet of Monster Munch yesterday. Still great. Still really good.
Great. Yeah. Which flavour did you go for? Pickled onion?
Classic pickled onion, of course. Like sometimes I'll treat myself to a flaming hot.
Yeah.
But pickled onion is the classic.
Yeah, never roast beef.
Roast beef. Who goes for roast beef?
I'll enjoy it if it's part of a multi-pack, but you know.
I'll eat it if it's part of a multi-pack, but I won't enjoy it. I'll tolerate it. I won't enjoy it.
Well, I remembered at the time you talking about that and going, I'm sure I was a member of some fan clubs. And I remember it was the Dennis the Menace fan club I was very much a member of. So that launched back in June 1976 in the strip's 25th year. Readers back then would send in for a 30p membership card. And I remember I got this as well. It was still doing this type of thing. So yeah, you had a membership card, you had badges, secret passwords, and you could write to Dennis for agony aunt type advice. And then a badge that would... I saw a picture of it online. I should post this at some point. You'd get like a badge with Nasher on it with googly eyes and fur-like, you know, textures around it.
I love Dennis the Menace as a character, but I do have to question his skills, his abilities as an agony aunt.
Yeah, probably not the best advice in the world.
Do you know what, Dennis? I'm having a real tough time at the moment. I'm actually really struggling emotionally. How should I kind of... You know, what should I do? What's the next step?
Well,
You'd be like, I don't know.
Pea shooter out.
Yeah, I don't know. Get your pea shooter, get your catapult, cause some real mischief for Walter the Softy, and you'll be right as rain.
But yeah, the Beano was so popular that it even had its own section of Chessington World of Adventures theme park, Beano-Land, which opened in 2000 and survived for a decade before sponsorship was sadly lost. So apparently a lot of the Beano-Land attractions are still there, but they were sort of rethemed as a place called Wild Asia. So I'm annoyed that it was there for about 10 years and I never went. That would have been really quite
at least
even now to have gone to.
At least they remodelled it. It's not like Blobbyland.
Oh yeah, Blobbyland. God, that should be an episode in itself. Blobbyland and Crinkly Bottom and all that. That was just.
During the 90s, Mr. Blobby craze, and there was Blobbyland, which Mr. Blobby had his own. Again, if you're an international listener, you have literally no idea what we're talking about.
Just look up Mr. Blobby. Yeah,
just Google Mr. Blobby. That guy had his own theme park, which has since just sort of closed down and fallen into disrepair. And if you Google now, like, Blobbyland today, it's like terrifying. There's just like, it's like a theme park that's been just left to decay. It's really, really
it's like Chernobyl, essentially.
It's like Chernobyl, but with Mr. Blobby. Yeah, which to be honest, I really enjoyed Chernobyl, the TV drama, but I couldn't help but think this would be better if Mr. Blobby was in it, as I think with most TV shows.
But yeah, amazingly, the Beano is still going. I genuinely thought I'd read somewhere that it had gone like online. I thought it'd become an online.
Yeah,
thing.
I thought it went online only, digital. I thought it went digital.
Yeah, I thought that, and maybe I've just totally got the wrong end of the stick. But I've gone on the website. As far as I can tell, you can still subscribe to the Beano. So it's, as far as I can tell, still going. Over 4,000 odd issues later, and Dennis is now at least 70. And still going strong. So, but there are only 12 known existing copies of the first edition of the Beano, and one of those fetched £12,100 at auction in 2004. So, if somehow you come into contact with one of the early editions, you're going to get a bit of dosh coming your way. Why you'd part with it, I don't know, but yeah. It says the Beano's weekly circulation in April 1950 was around 1.9 million. and it currently sells slightly over 31,000. So quite a dip, obviously, but in this day and age, it's absolutely fair enough.
There's other stuff going on these days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just still glad 31,000 people are still getting the Beano every week, apparently. I mean, I don't know. That was on Wikipedia. That might have been dated 10 years ago. But as far as I can tell, it is still going. So, yeah, I just wanted to go through a couple of particularly geeky things I wanted to focus on for the Beano. So, do you remember the 90s scandal of the Bash Street Kids?
I don't.
No? Okay.
Fascinating.
So, like many long-running UK comic strips, the Bash Street Kids is very much frozen in the era that it began. So, it portrays...
it's frozen in the area, it's frozen in the ear, and it's
the
frozen,
era.
and the era.
Yeah.
All three are fine.
It shows Class 2B of the Bash Street School in Beano Town, where the teacher and headmaster still wear mortarboards and gowns, and the students still have wood desks with inkwells, even though it's now 2021. They're still doing the same thing.
Wait, I mean, I had wood desks at school. Do kids not have wooden desks anymore?
I doubt it.
What are your desks made of?
No, I mean, like the really old school ones with the inkwells and and the ones you'd open up and all that kind of stuff.
No, I didn't have an inkwell, but we had like a wooden desk that you would open up.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a thing to put your ruler in and everything?
Yeah. Cornwall,
wow.
isn't it? Cornwall.
It is Cornwall.
It's about
wheel ledger and that.
you think it's about 25 years ago I was at school, but then you have to appreciate that I grew up in Cornwall, so add about another 20 years.
Yeah.
Subtract another 20 years.
So you were about 1938 by the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So fair enough. But anyway, it's still very much frozen in the time it was created. They are taught by a stereotypical teacher whose wife is conveniently called Mrs. Teacher. And the characters are, just go through them quickly, Danny, whose full name is Daniel Deathshed Morgan. There you go, that's his full name. Generally depicted in a skull and crossbones jumper and a floppy red school cap. He became the leader earlier on in the strip after he gave each kid a wine gum. So that was all it was required to become the leader. I know I'd follow him if he gave me a wine gum.
I mean, bribery and corruption, but, it pays.
Herbert, whose real name is Herbert Henry Hoover, is a short-sighted boy who struggles to see even with his spectacles. Except for Cuthbert, the rest of the class have fun swapping his thick-rimmed glasses with others and seeing the resultant mayhem.
Mayhem. Like sometimes I lose my glasses, and the ultimate irony is you can't find your glasses if you don't have your glasses. But I would describe that more as an irritant. Rarely, if ever, has mayhem resulted when I lose my glasses.
Freddie, his real name is Frederick Joseph Brown. He is a large, round boy who is always eating, it says here.
A large, round boy.
Only in later strips is he ridiculed for his weight. He usually reacts by trying to prove the others wrong, but earlier he is indifferent, so I don't know what that means, but there you go. Took him a while to get out, come out of his shell a little bit. Plug, whose real name is Percival Proudfoot Plugsley. He is a lanky, gangling character with a large overbite, protruding ears, 2 buck teeth, and a wide nose.
Gangling?
I've
heard of gangling.
Gangler.
Gangling? A lanky gangling? I didn't realise it was a verb that you could gangle. to gangle.
Sydney, whose real name is Sydney Mason Pye, is a Toots' twin brother whose spiked haircut resembles a chimney-sweeping brush, and it says here he is a trickster.
They didn't spend too long with that nickname, did they? Really?
Not really, no. Toots' real name is Kate Pye, the twin sister, the only girl in Class 2B, although she is a tomboy. It says here, I haven't written this, it's what it says here, she is more feminine than Minnie the Minx. She is a fan of boy bands and has admitted on a crush on Dennis the Menace, sending him a Valentine. There you go. Smithy, his full name is Aristotle John Smithy. When teacher calls the roll, instead of saying present sir, he says gift miss. Smithy. Although he is sometimes very kind and intuitive, most of the time he cannot remember what colour the sky is. Not the brightest spark. Spotty, whose real name is James Jasper Cameron, is a short boy who wears a blue-collared jersey.
James Cameron?
Yeah, that's his full name is James Cameron. Yeah. He is a short boy who wears a blue-collared jersey and an extremely long striped tie. He is proud and protective of the 976 black spots covering his face, fending off any attempts to remove them. And finally, Wilfred, whose real name is Wilfred John Wimble, is the smallest and quietest of the Bash Street Kids and has social anxiety, his thoughts hidden behind a green jumper going up to his nose. He loves turtles and resembles a tortoise. His neck is never seen because when he removes his jumper, his vest is just as high.
Yeah,
so there you go.
I think he was my favourite. He looked like a Sontaran from Doctor Who.
But yeah, so those so you get a picture in your mind of what they all look like and all that. So in 1994, which was the Bash Street Kids' 40th anniversary, it was announced that the Bash Street Kids would be overhauled to appeal to a more politically correct modern audience. Changes included the replacement of Danny's trademark school hat by a top hat, Fatty, as he's actually known.
Sorry. So they were like, right, we've got to update this for modern times because some of this is a little bit offensive. What's the most offensive thing about it? I don't know. His hat.
His hat,
what?
Yeah.
Make it a top hat.
Fatty became fit and muscular. Tomboy Toots began acting more feminine, and then Plug got like really attractive. He became like a bit of a heartthrob.
Surely, the thing to do here is to say like it's totally valid for a girl to be
exactly.
You know, don't use the phrase tomboy, but it's totally valid for a girl to have those interests, and it's also like he doesn't need to be super buff, like he can be fat, just don't pick on him for it. Like
exactly.
I feel like this went totally in the wrong direction. Don't bash the Bash Street Kids.
The school would be replaced by a technologically advanced academy, and teacher was replaced by a robot. A protest soon began.
Right. I'm really offended by the Bash Street Kids. What are you offended by? Mostly the fact that their teacher is a human. I demand an android. Like what? Bizarre.
A protest began, accompanied by petitions and publicity stunts throughout Britain, demanding that the characters remain the same.
Give us a robot!
No, they want the opposite. They want it to go back to normal. That's why they're protesting. The proposal turned out to be a hoax when the story introduced the new Bash Street Kids. It saw them go back to their old ways. It was just all it was a storyline in the.
Well, I can't believe you let me say all that stupid shit when you knew all along.
Well,
it was
you
a
fell
hoax.
for it as well, just as bad as everyone else.
I'm embarrassed myself.
Yeah. Apparently, editor Ewan Kerr was pleased with the fan response, saying that the publication even got death threats! ! Like he was really happy with it.
Thumbs up.
But I'd say that was like a really great early example of something that would actually happen now, in terms of them actually trying to stay politically correct and all that. But also just a great example of companies sort of purposely poking the bear just to get a reaction.
Don't poke
like
the
nowadays,
bear.
it happens all the time, don't they? People high street shops will deliberately release something a bit risque on top so that the Daily Mail will write about it and then it gets in the press, or the Colin the Caterpillar stuff, you know, in whatever shop that was, Aldi, because they know it's going to get some clicks, they know it's going to get some reaction. And that's why I feel like the Beano, way ahead of its time, was like, do you know what, this will get people talking, let's just put this out there as a press release, and it worked. Really clever. Anyway, so on to Dennis the Menace then. So the comic is now led by, we've mentioned him a few times, Dennis the Menace. He is I don't know how old he is, I guess 10 to 12, wears a red and black striped jumper. He's just very naughty. He has a pet dog called Nasher. He even has a pet pig called Rasher. And
isn't there Nipper as well? He's got like one little fang.
Yeah. And he has big bushy hair, and he always has a catapult, and he's always just getting up to scrapes and all that kind of stuff. So Dennis the Menace first appeared in issue 452 in 1951. It's the longest running strip in the comic. The idea and name of the character emerged when the comic's editor heard a British music hall song with the chorus, "I'm Dennis the Menace from Venice."
Dennis the Menace from Venice, each pretty young gal on that old Grand Canal walks around with a grin when she's been riding in his gondola.
The creation of Dennis in the 50s had sales of the Beano soar. So, we said earlier, from issue 1678 onwards, he replaced Biffo to front the magazine.
Look, Dennis is a great character, but I'm not massively surprised that sales soared, given that their starting concept was Ostrich. Like, you know, it's a low bar. It's a low bar to vault.
But yeah, this was amazing. So coincidentally, on the 12th of March 1951, which is the exact same week that Dennis the Menace was created in Britain, another comic strip named Dennis the Menace debuted in the US. So you might have seen him. You know, he's like the blonde-haired kid who also has a catapult and all that kind of stuff.
I've seen.
And he got got made into a film.
Yeah, I've seen. I'm mostly familiar from the '90s movie starring Walter Matthau.
Dennis the Menace.
That's me!
America's classic kid in a classic American comedy. Directed by Nick Castle, a John Hughes production.
As a result of this, the US series is retitled just Dennis for UK audiences like the film, while the British character, if he does appear in America, he's just called Dennis and Nasher outside the UK. So, but what are the chances of that in the same, not only same year, but the same week, two complete different characters but very similar? And so no one can accuse the other one of copying because it all just
and I'm pretty sure they both use a catapult and
they're very, very similar.
That is odd. That is odd.
Yeah. I don't know if that Dennis the Menace from Venice song was just huge at the time, and maybe they both heard it at the, who knows? But I find that absolutely fascinating. Sadly, they've never done a team up. I think that's just crying out to happen.
Why is that not happened?
I know. You should at some point they would have teamed up and gone, right, let's just do a one-off, like in The Office where Michael Scott met up with David Brent. Why not? Be a laugh. So anyway, Dennis is the archetypal badly behaved schoolboy. The main recurring storyline throughout the years features his campaign of terror against. Now this is where it gets a bit risque, and I think they've toned down this now. A campaign of terror against a gang of what he calls softies, which is essentially effeminate, well-behaved boys. Particularly Walter the Softie, who essentially, I remember recently, I think the Beano jokingly accused Jacob Rees-Mogg of copying Walter's the style and mannerisms and everything. So, Walter finds himself in unfavourable circumstances on many occasions, although he sometimes gets the last laugh. Author Michael Rosen stated that in most children's books, a bad child gets made good, but the great thing about Dennis is he never gets better. So I quite like that.
No comeuppance.
Yeah. Now this is something I found absolutely fascinating. So this is what you knew about earlier. So,
I love this.
So forever, Dennis's parents were middle-aged, sort of bordering on old folks, quite prim and proper. And his dad he had no hair. Bald. I don't think he had a mustache. Yeah. He sort of resembled like a John Cleese like character, like John Cleese doing an old fogey type thing.
Didn't he have a Hitler mustache?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But then for the 75th anniversary, Dennis's parents noticeably changed appearance. So his father had suddenly become a pot-bellied man with black spiky hair and similar coloured schemed clothes on him, and his mother had red shaggy hair. And then it was revealed in 2015 that Dennis's father was the original Dennis the Menace from the 80s.
So, have they actually... Let's confirm this is canon.
Yeah.
This is canon.
Yeah.
I thought this was like a fan theory.
Yeah, it was revealed in issue 3932 in a featured strip about him campaigning to be mayor, in which his opponent, Walter the Softie's father, starts a hate campaign by showing potential voters videos of Dennis Sr.'s antics as a child. And although there was no distinct timeline in the comic strip, Editor-in-Chief Mike Sterling explained there's no definable lineage in Dennis and Nasher, but there can only ever be one Dennis at any time. It serves as a salutary warning that even the coolest kids can become boring grown-ups. So the flashback appeared and it showed Dennis in the 80s, which was Dennis's dad's memories. Yeah, so at no point did they say, by the way, this has now changed. But it just suddenly did.
But at a certain point, you went from following the adventures of the original Dennis to suddenly leaping forward about like 30, 40 years in the future, where the Dennis you have been following is now much older, and he has a kid who's the new Menace, and the red-headed mum, is that Minnie the Minx?
Maybe it is.
Maybe
it is.
But that is baffling.
But does that mean like Roger the Dodger and Minnie the Minx, they've all just had children who are exactly the same as them? Has it happened to all of them? Every single Bash Street kid?
Are they now the Bash Street adults? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if like the whole sort of Beano lineup aged up with. But imagine that. Imagine if they just if the Simpsons just suddenly you just tuned in for the next episode. I mean, no one tunes in for the Simpsons anymore. But imagine if you did. For the sake of argument, and suddenly Bart was just like 45, and it was all about his kids. It'd be madness. But they just did it on a whim. Those crazy Beano guys.
But that's what I like about the Beano, is that even today they do little things like that surely are only going to be of interest to adults, or But that's why I'm like, do the Dennis team up then. do the team up with the American Dennis. Why not?
Yeah, if you're going to be,
someone will love it.
If you're going to be that nerdy about the Dennis timeline, get the Dennises together. Why not?
Absolutely fascinating. So there were a few times that the Beano ventured into TV as well. So first we did have the Dennis the Menace and Nasher show in 1991, which I didn't see at the time as I was a bit too young. I don't believe it's ever been repeated, but some of it is on YouTube. Essentially, it was puppet based. It was very much a puppet show with a few cartoons here and there. So worth checking it out if you want.
Teacher says I've got to stay behind and look at all these mouldy old paintings. Sunflowers by Van Gogh. Ha! Pansies by Walter. Yuck, the softy. This is the only thing in a frame I'm interested in. Ha ha ha! Flower pie. The window frame! This is Menace art, the art of escaping. This one's called Gone by the Back Way. Freedom!
Dennis, what are you doing?
What? Teacher? Well, no more painting for me. Time to varnish.
But then in 1993, this was great. They released the Beano video on VHS. Now, as a kid, this was incredibly exciting because, like, you'd see these Beano characters suddenly on TV in motion, and it was what you'd be picturing in your head.
Yeah.
And and it was a lot of fun. Again, you can see a lot of it on YouTube. If you search for Beano All Stars, you can see it on there. Seeing those clips again on YouTube, researching this, it was just amazing because I hadn't seen it since probably about 1994. It was amazing. And this was followed by the Beano Video Stars in 1994, which I only knew existed when I was researching this episode. So I'm genuinely upset that I never got that for Christmas. Never knew it happened. But it is on YouTube in full, so I did enjoy watching a lot of that back, and I probably, when I have the time, give it a watch. And then in 1996, we had the first full TV series on the BBC, so Dennis and Nasher. This ran for 2 series and 26 episodes, and it was genuinely really funny, and it still holds up. So here's the intro for us to enjoy now.
This I remember. I cannot believe that this only lasted two years because it seemed to be on all the time.
All the time.
In a good way.
Dennis.
Well, a couple of things there. First of all, we don't really talked a lot about Nasher in detail, but
no.
I know they say people look like they're pets, but what are the odds that Dennis would find a dog that is as much of a dick as he is? Like, but also the sort of the breadth of the adventures that. So again, doesn't translate to audio, but that title sequence was essentially like a series of clips of all the scrapes. All the mischief that Dennis would get up to, and some of it was like, he dropped a banana skin and someone slipped over. Oh, he's got in with his catapult and his pea shooter, and then some bits are like Dennis controlling a giant robot, and it's like that's a lot. The breadth of his mischief is to be marvelled at.
Well, there's one bit that I still think about every now and then. There's this one line, and thankfully I managed to find it. It's one of those things where, in my head and my memories, I think it's really funny, but showing it to you now without the real context behind it, you'll probably go, oh, yes, it's perfectly humorous, I suppose. But anyway, talking about what you just said there, it was the whole episode of where there was like this secret agent in town, and he accidentally got into a spaceship, and he's suddenly in space, and he's like taking down his baddie like it's James Bond. But there's this one bit that I still think about where he gets into this spaceship, and he's
this is Dennis. Dennis gets into
Dennis and Nasher. Oh yeah, Nasher's there as well. And he's in space, and because the ship thinks he's this secret agent, he's meant to get this baddie, and then he finds the instructions, and then the instructions sings a little song. I've got to give you a little bit. But it sings a little song, and I still hear this song in full. You know, like the useless bits of information you have.
Yeah.
I still know this bit of music in my head all this time. So again, you might not even find it funny, and if you don't, I'll leave this bit out. But here you go. It's a little taste of why I love this series so much.
All right.
What's going on, Nasher? Yeah. Maybe those are the instructions that the man was talking about.
You've been sent to be the baddie. Your picture's in your pack. Every agent's falsified. So, we won't expect you back.
This must be the baddie.
It just seemed really like it was too clever for what it was in. Like, I felt it was a sort of humour which was like, that's like genuinely really funny. That should have been saved for like an actual proper sitcom. I feel like, you know, but maybe I don't know.
No, I enjoyed it. It was perfectly humorous.
Yeah. Anyway, so there was a revamped Dennis and Nasher series that aired from 2009 for 2 series and 105 episodes. I have to admit, I haven't ever watched it, as I was 23 by this point, but still, I'm very glad it happened.
Don't pretend like that was the obstacle. You just didn't know it existed. You wouldn't have watched it.
I probably would have done, yeah. But it does have a kick-ass theme tune in the style of Busted, and it was written by Ian Cook, who is one of the members of Churches.
What?
Which is amazing.
What?
So, pre-Churches, Ian just did this, and it's great. If I told you this was Busted or McFly, you'd assume I was telling the truth, or at least one of those like bands from the US at the time that they were trying to be. So yeah, have a listen to this.
Ready, Nasher? Let's go!
Playing by the rules is highly overrated. Unstoppable, yeah. They can't hold us back. We'll make the most of every second. Nothing's gonna bring us down today, yeah. Open up your eyes, the world outside is waiting.
That could be one of the best theme tunes of all time. That was bloody brilliant.
Do you know what though? It's almost brilliant. It's almost like a mid noughties pop punk classic, except the lead singer never quite commits. No. He sounds like a little bit embarrassed.
Well, I think Ian was probably embarrassed that he was doing it. To be honest, I should be in a proper band.
Yeah, and he was. You know, give it time.
He was in the end.
But you know, he sounds like a little bit. Yeah. A little bit reserved.
But anyway, and currently we have Dennis and Nasher Unleashed, which began in 2017.
Dennis and Nasher Retaliation.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it is still going after 2 series and 103 episodes. It hasn't been cancelled from what I can tell, so hopefully it might come back. It's a bit of a modern twist. I'm assuming the comics are the same. It says here that Walter the Softie is now called Walter Brown, and he is now more cunning than wet. I added wet. But yeah, he's more of a like, what can I do to get Dennis, as opposed to like what he was before. Yeah, apparently Dennis is voiced by Freddie Fox in this series, so a little...
All right,
little upgrade there. But yeah, that's pretty much it for my little trip down memory lane for the Beano. So thoughts after all that?
Yeah, like I love the Beano. I loved it before. I love it even more now, I think. Really enjoyed that.
How long do you think kids will still be interested in this sort of thing? Because it is still going, so I'm glad, you know.
I mean, we could probably do some maths here and work out like that decline from 1.5 million to 30,000. How long would it take before kids? Yeah, I don't know, and I think it's a shame how much kids are playing with whoopee cushions and pea shooters and catapults anymore. No, but that's a shame. I've really enjoyed this retrospective. I would go so far as to say it was absolutely Beano.
So Beano.
So Beano.
So for more geeky nonsense, please head to 2geeks2beers.com, where you can download and subscribe to all our past episodes, including ones based on the more traditional fare of comic books like Defenders of the Earth or Batman, the animated series. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, so please do rate and review us as well. means a huge amount, and we're also on YouTube if you prefer your podcast on there for some reason.
Yep. You could also get in touch with us either on all the social channels, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We are Two Geeks Cast on all of those, and if you follow us on there, we'll post clips from all our latest episodes, teasers, and we reach out to our fans. Reach out and touch someone. You can also email us, podcast at twogeeks2beers.com, if you want to send us feedback or not abuse, ideally, but I mean we'll take anything. We'll definitely read it. So get in touch with us there.
And you can also support us on our Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/2geekscast, depending on the different tiers, you can get different things. So you get exclusive bonus episodes, mini-sodes, and even episodes of your own choosing. There's also a 2 Geeks beer mat and other merch on there. In fact, we did have a new patron we want to give a shout out this week. So thank you, Sarah Scott, for signing up. A beer mat. It could well already be with you by the time you're listening to this episode, so thanks very much. So yeah, thanks very much for joining us. I was trying to think of a witty sign-off, and so was looking to see if Dennis had any obvious catchphrases. And it says here on Beano-pedia that his catchphrase is apparently blam, which in his words means awesome. So in that case, blam.
Perfect.
Sadly, I don't think the Dandy is with us in the same form anymore.
Dandy's died.
Yeah, well, sort of. It's now, it says here, the last print edition of the Dandy, a 100-page edition featuring a countdown of the comic's top 75 characters, was published in December 2012. However, the Dandy continued online and in the Dandy app.
Right. I like the idea that some kids are like, no, I'm not going to read the Dandy on paper. Are you jesting? No way. And then someone's like, look, they're like, I'm playing Fortnite. I'm busy. And they're like, look, I know what you're thinking, but don't worry. Now it's on an app, the Dandy app, and the kids are like, well, sign me up. I didn't realize that it was an app. Like, well, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference.
It says that they decided to axe the comic as it didn't ultimately attract the publicity and customers that the company initially wanted. It ended in June 2013, although annuals and occasional summer specials continue to be published. So,
there you go. I'm just gonna download the Dandy app. No, of course I'm not, because no one ever has ever. I don't believe anyone's ever subscribed to the Dandy app. I'm just saying it makes me annoyed. The Dandy app. Fuck me.